Okay, here we go. NSCA, Essentials of Personal Training, Chapter 11. We're on the postural alignment and movement assessments. We'll do this presentation and I'll do a quick kind of sidebar regarding training load, but this is the last of the main evaluation protocols that they talk about in the book. So we'll start off on 236 and go to 242, and let's get rolling. The first one they talk about is postural alignment, or a plumb line assessment, excuse me, in postural alignment. Now, I'll tell you, when you do a postural alignment and you do a postural assessment and you're looking at somebody with a plumb line assessment, the person isn't really moving. And because they're static, you can kind of put this back in terms of evaluating the person as opposed to evaluating their performance. But the way the book has this mapped out, they kind of have this tucked into evaluating performance. A plumb line is great. And the reason why it's called a plumb line, it's great to a point, but here's the thing. The reason why it's called a plumb line, if you can think of like a line that goes vertical, it's a plumb line that goes straight from ceiling to floor, that a person will stand in front of that and you would evaluate any number of bullet points that include eyes, the head position, shoulder position, elbows, uh, pelvis, thighs, ankles, knees, etc. I tend to look at people just in terms of bullet points. I put bullet points on the shoulders. I put them on the elbows, the wrists, the hips, the knees, and the ankles. And so when I first meet people, I mean, they don't know it, but when I first meet them, I'm actually starting the evaluation process even before I shake their hand, as I watch them walk in the front door, like how they just operate and function day to day. But that's different because that's with movement, whereas a plumb line assessment is static. They're just standing still. So you have to be able to kind of just, have somebody stand there, and what'll happen is they'll stand and you tell them we're doing a plumb line assessment. The first thing they do when they walk in, they go from this, they go whoop, 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 and they straighten themselves out. So the test itself is biased at that point because the person wants to perform well on the test. And when I tell you you'd like to be able to evaluate the person in their natural state and how they operate throughout their day, that's what you want. So a plumb line is great to a point. You're not really evaluating the person to see how they're moving. It's how they are in a static state. It's good though. And you'll sometimes see like movement screens that'll have plumb line, but also they have a grid pattern on a door. Like when you shut the door and a person stands with their back against the back of the door, and that grid pattern allows you to kind of map and chart shoulder height on one side, elbow height on the other side, and kind of evaluate the person against a grid backdrop, which is good. Don't get me wrong. It's another great tool. There's a couple of them out there, but you get better at kind of picking up these deficiencies and imbalances on people right when they walk in the door. All right, we're going into the different views that they talk about. So if you can think about the three cardinal planes, that's what they're going into is you have one from the anterior side, now you have one from the posterior side, and the different bullet points you look at. And then you have lateral, right? So you're looking at it from the side of the person. And that's another great one in terms of where their ear falls over the shoulders, over the hips and the knees. Oftentimes people look more like question marks when they come in. I have to often tell them, I want you to look more like an exclamation point, stand up. And that's a good cue point, but that's what you're after here with using a plumb line assessment from a lateral aspect from the side. So the different areas that they suggest that you look at are these areas and what you're looking for each one of them, which is great. But I'll tell you what you need to do is you need to find a way to quantify this. At this point, you're just talking more of like subjective evaluation, what you think, how the person looks. Maybe they could be standing a little bit straighter. Perhaps they have some anterior pelvic tilt. You need to straighten them out. Unless you quantify that, it makes it inherently difficult to be able to, get a person to understand what is optimal. I oftentimes, when I work with people, I just work with them and I kind of manipulate their bodies and move them around a little bit to get them in the position I want. And it's just a matter of they have to kind of re-educate themselves in terms of what is proper or most efficient position. Moving on. Closed kinetic chain, upper extremity stability, CQs as it's called. You have a line on the floor, then you have another line on the floor, and you have the hands, one on each line, and you reach across and touch, reach across and touch, reach across and touch. And as you're touching, you're returning back to the original position and then come back and you count a touch every time. And you're evaluating how many times they can touch. And there's a little bit of a conditioning component here. And you look at this, they talk here, the client is unable to perform the test properly, stop the test, wait for 45 seconds, and start the test again. So the goal you have here is you're trying to determine their upper limb function and stability and their ability to basically transition from a wide position on two hands, and they have to switch over to one hand at one point, right? Because there's one hand in the air as they're bringing the right over to the left. And then that takes them out of balance. They come back over. They have to bring the left hand now over to the right and back and forth. So there's a little bit of like a balance component to this. And it's a matter of just having the person be able to do this in as many times in 15 seconds. You take that number, you then plug it in, and you use the table on 1132 to be able to help you in terms of where they stand in terms of like normative values. But I'll tell you, when you look at this test, you start to look at the bullet points on the person. Are they able to stay pretty square in the hips? Are they dropping the hips to get there? Do the shoulders lose their integrity? Are they bending their knees? There's different areas where it becomes a qualitative analysis as well as quantitative, but it's how many times they can touch back and forth in 15 seconds. Single leg squat and forward step down tests. With both of these, you're kind of using that bullet point example where you have shoulders, hips, knees, and ankle. And as they're doing this test, you're trying to evaluate if they're able to stay in position, if they have to bend, get out of position, if they lose their balance. What's the integrity of the knee? Do they have valgus or vargus? Do they bend the knee in or out? Are they internally rotating at the hip to cause valgus? And so it's a matter of, are they able to squat to at least a 45-degree position in the knee while they're doing either one of these exercises and be able to retain their balance and be able to look functional while doing it. And again, this comes down to, it's kind of a combo platter where it's qualitative and quantitative. FMS, functional movement screen, FMS, they try to quantify different movement patterns by offering a point value. If the person can perform a particular movement, they get 3 points. If they can't because of injury or they're in pain, then it's a 0. So there's a point value associated with seven different movement patterns, and the most you can have is 21 points. And then you can categorize your person into like if they're great, good, average, or poor. I would say if you're going to use this, you need to find a way to quantify the qualitative analysis, meaning you're going to have somebody in front of you performing an exercise. You have to come up with how you want to quantify a rep. Is it a good rep? Is it a bad rep? Is it missed? Is it terrible? Do they look like they're just going to fall over when they stand on one foot? That's kind of up to you, but I will tell you, maybe seek out FMS as a tool to help you in supporting ways to come up with quantifying some of these assessments. All right, guys, I'm going to go ahead and bring it back to 195 here, or 197, which is our starting page. So we made it through all of these. I got one more to go, just a sidebar conversation regarding training load. All right, signing off.